it's winter container time. It took me a little bit to get it done this year. The weather completely just blew my plans out of the water last weekend, but really nice, wonderful weekend to wrap it up. Every year is a little different. I never know, how things are gonna go. There's always little challenges, and there were quite a few this year in addition to the weather. But it's nice to have something, right? I don't know if I'm going to say that any of these are like the best ones I've ever done, and that's probably because I didn't really go into it with a lot of a plan this year, which is not normally how I do it. But they're pretty, they're done. Let's take a look at them. I'm actually just putting the final touch on this window box, but that's why I want to start the video here, because I want to show you that you're gonna see a lot of pine cones this year. I love a pine cone. This is a sugar pine, and then the fatter ones that I have, they're kind of shorter and fatter, are Jeffrey pine cones. Those are my favorite ones to get if I can find them. Pine cones are expensive, so I always save them year to year. But I went through and I added stakes to more of them. It makes it so much easier to hold them in a container. And I just use a drill and drill a little hole in there. Take some hot glue, and this is actually just a skewer from the grocery store, and stick that in there, and then you can stick them in and secure them a little bit better. I have, and in some cases there are some of them here that I've just laid them in, and they tend to stay just fine. But if you're defying a little bit of gravity, or you want to make sure things are really going to stick together, this is a really nice way to do it. So in this case, I actually have just one piece of foam that the ring is sitting on. So that's what I'm actually sticking this into, is that foam there on the end. As long as I'm up here on the ladder, let's take a look at this. So I've always done this lighted ring. This year, it did not get as many lights on it as it usually does, but I didn't know that until I turned them on last night for the first time. I had to buy new lights because the lights from last year did not work. And I only put one string of 500. These are the little cluster, LED cluster lights, and I just use wire ties or zip ties to put them on there. Every year I take them off and put this behind the garage. And I thought, why do I do that? I do the same thing every year. So this year when we take it down, I'm actually going to put more lights on it and then hang it in the basement or the garage, so it's all set up for next year. So that's that. By the way, I have done tutorials on how I put these boxes together, and I'll link those below, but this is more of showing you what we've done. So a variety of greens here. I don't even know what they all are, to be honest. There's obviously some spruce in there, some incense cedar in there, some really pretty juniper. Those are real juniper berries in there. And then obviously there's a few sticks. This is fantail willow. Far fewer sticks and branches in my containers this year than previous years, in part because I found them to be extraordinarily expensive. And then I did some yellow twig dogwood, which you'll see in every other pot has yellow twig dogwood as well. Then I just really did this sort of center cluster of pine cones, and then we kind of scattered the pine cones throughout. So for instance, that's a Jeffrey pine cone right there. And we just sort of scattered those throughout. There is, as usual, let me get you up there so you can see. If you look back there, there's just a string of lights just in a mess back there, which you can't see from anywhere. And that provides this sort of inner glow from the middle, which I like to do on any pot when I'm able to. And then I also have these little lights. These are the Lumineo cherry lights, and there's 3 sizes of them, and they're all in warm white. So I just sort of dot those throughout. Gives it a really nice look. So that's the window box, my favorite one to do every year by far. And I love seeing this one from inside as well. So it never fails. This happens every year. I do all these sort of extravagant containers, and then the simplest ones are the ones I kind of end up liking the most. So this is the Golden Curls willow that was growing in the 2 pots on the driveway apron, which we have moved to here on the patio. I'm hoping they'll make it through the winter. They should. They're plenty hardy. So we've just put those pots up here, and then actually I had to do a little bit of pruning on the blue globe spruces. There's no lights in these containers at all. I could still add some in. I wouldn't mind a little string along the middle, but on the other hand, there's a lot of lights here on the front of the house, so maybe we don't need it. We'll see. I can always add it in. But What I love is the blue foliage with the beautiful yellow willow coming out. And ignore the ladder, but here, and then here's the other one, obviously. Same thing. And very simple, but I think it's the blue spruce that really puts this one over the top. So this was the container that I started trying to work on last weekend when it was so cold, and I was just kind of throwing stuff in the pot because at that point I didn't care. And then halfway through I thought, well, let's see what I can do in the basement to try to do something in a warm spot. So I took a bunch of grapevine that I had and was saving it in case I wanted to use it in winter pots, actually. And I just sort of twined it into these big loops, and then I wrapped these in lights. And I thought, well, and then it's kind of mounted on a stake. I thought, I have no idea how this is gonna work. And then we did a bunch of greens, obviously lots more pine cones. I told you I'm really into pine cones always, but especially this year. Some red berries, because I did want to get a little pop of red in here. I tried red berries in the window box, and it just seemed it just was almost caught your attention too much. So, but I did want to do some somewhere. I do like a little bit of red. And then I did these funky picks from a couple of years ago. They faded very badly the first year I used them, so I actually just spray painted them. And then more of those cherry lights, and there is a big wad of lights in the back of this one too. Now, what I'm going to say is that what I should have done for the lights on this one was I should have done those tiny little lights on copper wire, or even like cluster lights like on the ring, because these kind of look a little bit messy wrapped around there. So here's the water bowl. And for this, I really wanted to do something in here, but I didn't really have a lot of ingredients left to do stuff with, and I didn't think it was necessary because this isn't one we're gonna be walking by. We mostly see this from the window. So what I did was I just cut branches out of our Norway spruces and just kind of wound them around, and then I stuck a piece of foam in the bottom of this and stuck whatever yellow twig dogwood I had left in the middle there. Simple, nice. I did stick a solar spotlight on it. The solar light itself is not the most attractive thing right there. So maybe I'll try to hide that a little bit better, and we'll see if that works to light that up a little bit. So I also really like how this pot turned out too. So I started with a couple of interesting things. First off was this piece in the front. This is actually, I think, meant to like go on a mantle or on the center of a table. A friend gave it to me because someone gave it to them and they couldn't use it, but I don't really want that in my house, so I stuck it here. Then I just filled in with some spruce tips in the back. Obviously the yellow twig dogwood, but in this case kind of lined up like little soldiers. Just a little bit of juniper in there. And then this is actually real winterberry that I bought. It won't last long out here. I'm sure it'll fall off and the birds will come eat it and whatever. I mean, I haven't used real berries maybe ever in a winter container, and it's so much prettier and so much more natural looking. I really love it. And then I just kind of lined up a few pine cones in there. No lights on this one either because, again, it's just a little bit, again, I could, but it requires more electrical engineering than I feel like. I don't think it needs it. It's nice to have this here. Plus there's lots of light here on the front between those other two containers. This filled in this whole front, this little mantelpiece thing. I think it worked out pretty well, actually. Now the urn. I always love doing the urn. I started here with this globe obelisk that I put in here every year for winter. I always think it's very pretty. Filled in with greens. This is another one that I was trying to do when it was frozen. So I was nothing was really sticking in the pot very well. Spent a lot of time trying to thaw this one out to even get in there. I wanted to be careful though because I didn't want to do anything to make this cast stone. I didn't want to expand things too fast when it was already frozen. Stuck in just a little bit of yellow twig dogwood at kind of odd angles sticking out. Pine cones, some blueberries, which I quite like in there. And then last year I bought these little, I don't know what these are even supposed to be, these little pom-pom ball things. I love chartreuse and blue. and yellow together. So that's kind of where that was at. Now the one problem with this pot is that the electrical that we have run to this part of the garden, several years ago we ran like an electrical outlet that pops up right in this garden. Well, it's not working, it has shorted out. So there are currently no lights in this pot, which is a huge bummer because this is my favorite one because this is the one I see the most from inside. You get the idea of what it is. It's still pretty during the day no matter what. Okay, so I do the containers more or less in the order I just showed you. Well, no, not necessarily, but all the ones up by the house I do first because as I run out of materials, I just want to make sure those look good, and then the rest of them we kind of use what we have. So this container by the garage is always the last one to get done, but I still think it's pretty. I think that this piece of driftwood looks like deer antlers. So I always put this in here. No one else thinks it looks like deer antlers, but I do, and I like them in here. I had a little bit of the dogwood in here for a little bit of color. Red berries, random little bits of evergreens that were left in here. And then I always put up a garland, a real skinny, pathetic looking one across the garage. Sometimes I think I like this sort of skinny, pathetic. This is roping, not actual garland. Roping tends to be very thin. I kind of like it because it's a very simple look. I throw a string of lights on it and I call it good. Last year, I put like hydrangeas and stuff on there, and I've hung various other kinds of lights. And, you know, I might do that again, but I felt kind of a need to just get some of these things done when I had a good weather window. And if I want to add to it, I certainly can. Or you can also call it good, and that's fine. Anyway, so then I run the way we hook this up. Extension cord is actually comes into the garage on this side, kind of underneath the climbing hydrangea there. It's a door that I almost wonder was maybe either for like a cat or chickens or something, because it's like a tiny little door on the back side. So we run the cord in there, hook that up to a timer. It goes around the back of the garage and connects to the garland. I'll show you. Come around the little corner here. Here we go. Just connects to the garland right there. Goes all the way over, and then I always run the garland into this pot. And then the lights in the pot run off of that. This was the year where all the lights that have worked in the past stopped working. And I guess we had a pretty good run and we got a lot of years out of a lot of those lights. But normally what I do when I just am jumbling up a string of lights in the center of a pot is I just grab any old lights. Well, most of those bit the dust last year. So I actually had to buy lights to put in there. And the only lights we could find had a white wire on them. So they're really obvious, which doesn't make a difference in the window box because they're easy to tuck in. But anything where you can see down into that white wire is quite distracting, such as here. So I had to cover that up with a lot of evergreen bows, which does limit the effect of them a little bit, but it's better than seeing that wire. And then I just take whatever's left from the garland string and work it through. So, I mean, and little red berries for some color. Is this any sort of stunning design? Absolutely not. Is it colorful and something to look at over here? You bet. I still like it. So these kinds of winter pots, and these are the winter pots that those of us who live in the north who can't grow anything in a pot outside at this time of year sort of have to do, is just a matter of foraging materials. And when I say foraging, I mean you might be ordering them off the internet or shopping for them at a garden center, but you could certainly, if you have material to choose from or you have a place to go foraging, you can do whatever, and then you can kind of make what you want based on what you find. I have an insatiable appetite for making these kinds of containers, so I almost cannot get my hands on enough material, and at some point I say enough money has been spent on this year because I do buy a lot of this stuff. And, after a while you think, okay, well, we can stop now. So I have not done the hanging basket trio underneath the tree, which I've been really excited to do for Christmas. I actually am going to try to just find some stuff. I have a little bit of garland left that maybe could work in there. I'd like to do a little something in there. I have a few little bits of greens left, and I actually started doing some pots at the house where I designed the garden earlier this year. I need to go finish up whatever I have left has to go in those pots. So we've kind of run out of material more than steam, I would say. I could do these, as long as it's warm out or tolerable to be outside, I could make these pots all day long. Now, in terms of physically constructing these, there's not a lot to it. I will say that I used to build these on structures of foam. And I decided that once that foam was no longer good, I was not going to replace it, and I haven't. So the foam is needed for the window box because that hoop is very heavy, and I need that hoop to sit, not sink down into soil. So I needed a chunk of foam, which I still had left. But everything else I just did straight into the dirt. Keep in mind, if it's cold enough that you're having to do these kinds of containers, it's also cold enough that no one's going to spend a lot of time like staring at the detail of them. So you don't, a little bit of the mess that goes into making them is okay. And you can always throw the little offcuts of your branches to cover up any ugly bits or bare holes. So the biggest thing with these, I would say, is just be creative with what you have and have fun with it, which I do. Like I said, not exactly a construction video, but you guys know how to construct these things. You're sticking, like I say all the time, you're just sticking sticks in soil. All right, I hope you guys are having a great day in your garden. We are let's say we're fairly festive here. Hope you are too, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.